When Maria Santos became Seattle's most trusted babysitter, parents relied on her to protect their children. But when her gambling addiction and kidnapping schemes consumed her, she began selling children to trafficking networks and murdering parents who became suspicious, turning bedtime stories into deadly nightmares. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the video. The Pacific Northwest rain drummed against the windows of Seattle's affluent Queen Anne neighborhood as Maria Santos prepared coloring books and snacks for what would become the most dangerous babysitting assignment of her 12-year career as the Northwest's most beloved childcare provider and nanny specialist. At 38 years old, Maria had established herself as Seattle's premier babysitting professional, specializing in overnight care and emergency childcare services that attracted wealthy families, working professionals, and single parents who valued her expertise with children and her reputation for providing safe, nurturing care during parents' absences. Maria's childcare service operated from her cozy apartment near Seattle Center, featuring child-safe furniture, educational toys, and emergency supplies that allowed her to provide comprehensive care for children of all ages during extended babysitting assignments throughout the metropolitan area. Her clientele included tech executives who traveled frequently for business, medical professionals whose demanding schedules required reliable overnight care, and divorced parents who needed trusted childcare during custody transitions and weekend arrangements. The interior of Maria's apartment reflected her dedication to child safety and her understanding of parents' expectations for both security and developmental enrichment during childcare services, featuring child-proofed environments, age-appropriate activities, and communication systems that allowed parents to stay connected with their children during extended separations. Her walls displayed childcare certifications, CPR training credentials, and photographs of happy children whose parents had trusted her with their most precious responsibilities during critical periods. But beneath Maria's reputation for childcare excellence lay a dangerous combination of gambling addiction, child trafficking operations, and systematic murder that had transformed her babysitting services into criminal enterprises where trusting families and suspicious investigators met their fate through kidnapping schemes and parental elimination. "Good evening, Maria," said Jennifer Harrison, her 7 o'clock client and a 42-year-old software executive whose demanding work schedule required reliable overnight childcare for her 8-year-old daughter Emma during business travel that could last several days. Jennifer was a single mother, earning over $200,000 annually, and had been relying on Maria's babysitting services for over 2 years, trusting her not only with Emma's care, but also with detailed knowledge of their family routines and security arrangements. "Good evening, Mrs. Harrison," Maria replied with the nurturing warmth and childcare expertise that had made her legendary among Seattle's professional parents, who viewed her as both caregiver and family guardian, capable of providing loving care while maintaining absolute security during parents' absence from their homes. "Emma and I have planned some wonderful activities for tonight, and I've prepared her favorite dinner. She'll be safe and happy while you focus on your important business meetings." Jennifer had become Maria's most dangerous client, not because of her demanding childcare requirements or her daughter's special needs, but because of her recent discovery of suspicious communications on Emma's tablet and her growing awareness of the child trafficking network that Maria had been operating while supposedly providing legitimate child care services. What Jennifer didn't know was that Maria had been systematically trafficking children and murdering suspicious parents for over 3 years, using her babysitting expertise and access to vulnerable families to identify suitable victims while eliminating anyone who discovered her criminal activities. Maria's transformation from loving babysitter to calculating killer had begun 5 years earlier, when her compulsive gambling addiction at tribal casinos had escalated from weekend entertainment to daily slot machine and poker table sessions that consumed her entire childcare income and forced her into desperate debt with organized crime figures who controlled Seattle's illegal gambling operations. Her losses had accumulated to over $300,000, with loan sharks demanding immediate payment and threatening violence against her family if she couldn't generate substantial income through criminal activities. Faced with impossible financial demands and credible threats of violence, Maria had been recruited by international child trafficking organizations who recognized her childcare expertise and family access as valuable assets for identifying and procuring children who could be sold to adoption fraud networks, forced labor operations, and other criminal enterprises that exploited vulnerable minors. Her criminal activities had escalated when several parents had discovered evidence of suspicious activities and had threatened to report their concerns to law enforcement agencies investigating child trafficking patterns in affluent Seattle neighborhoods. Maria had murdered her first victim, a prominent attorney who had detected unauthorized communications on her child's devices, by poisoning her coffee with concentrated ricin during what appeared to be a routine childcare consultation. The success of her first murder had convinced Maria that eliminating suspicious parents and threatening investigators was both necessary for protecting her trafficking operation and relatively easy to accomplish, given her trusted access to families' homes and her victims' complete confidence in her childcare expertise. Over the following 3 years, Maria had murdered 9 additional individuals using various methods that took advantage of her childcare knowledge, her access to families' homes during vulnerable babysitting periods, and her ability to stage deaths as household accidents or medical emergencies that occurred during routine childcare situations. Her victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of her criminal activities, their potential cooperation with law enforcement, and their family situations that provided opportunities for child procurement and parental elimination. Her victims had included Dr. Robert Chen, a pediatrician who had discovered evidence of child trafficking and whose home security system had been disabled during a fatal break-in that occurred while Maria was babysitting. Patricia Williams, a social worker who had reported suspicious childcare activities and whose death had been staged as a medication overdose during what appeared to be a suicide. And David Foster, a federal investigator who had been tracking child trafficking networks and whose family consultation had ended in fatal poisoning, disguised as food allergy reaction. Maria, I need to discuss some serious concerns about missing children and reports of trafficking activities connected to your babysitting services, said Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Seattle Police Department's Crimes Against Children Unit, as she arrived at Maria's apartment carrying a warrant to inspect her childcare facilities and interview her about suspicious activities. Detective Rodriguez specialized in investigating child exploitation and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of trafficking operations that exploited legitimate childcare services and family trust. Detective Rodriguez's investigation represented an existential threat to Maria's criminal operation, as her law enforcement expertise and access to child protection databases could expose the systematic trafficking operations and connect her to multiple missing children and suspicious parental deaths. Of course, Detective Rodriguez, Maria replied, though she felt the familiar surge of gambling addiction withdrawal and criminal desperation that accompanied any official scrutiny of her childcare operations by law enforcement officers who possessed the training and resources to detect evidence of child trafficking and systematic murder disguised as childcare accidents or family emergencies. Child safety and family protection are always my highest priorities, and I want to cooperate with any investigation that might help protect children and ensure that childcare services operate according to all applicable safety and legal standards. Detective Rodriguez consulted detailed reports from missing children investigations and child protection agencies that showed patterns of disappearances and suspicious activities that suggested systematic trafficking operations rather than random child abductions or legitimate childcare emergencies. Maria, I've been investigating reports of missing children and suspicious activities that appear to be connected to families who have used your babysitting services, Detective Rodriguez said with the investigative precision that had made her successful in solving complex child exploitation cases. 9 children who were in your care have disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, with several of these incidents occurring immediately, after their parents had expressed concerns about inappropriate communications or had threatened to report suspicious childcare activities to authorities. The detective's identification of the trafficking patterns and her recognition of the timing correlation between parental suspicions and family tragedies confirmed Maria's worst fears that her criminal activities had been analyzed and connected to her systematic elimination of suspicious parents and procurement of vulnerable children. Maria's response was swift and deadly as she realized that eliminating Detective Rodriguez was essential for protecting her criminal enterprise and preventing exposure of her systematic trafficking and murder operations. Detective Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about the emotional challenges that families face and the unfortunate reality that childcare emergencies can occur despite the highest safety standards and professional care protocols, Maria said, while discreetly reaching for a modified baby bottle that contained concentrated cyanide disguised as child medication for emergency elimination of law enforcement threats. Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in my childcare area, where I can demonstrate the safety procedures that might explain these tragic coincidences. Professional childcare involves complex emotional dynamics that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with child development and family crisis management. Detective Rodriguez agreed to examine Maria's childcare procedures, not realizing that the babysitter was leading her to a soundproof playroom where previous murders had been committed and where Maria planned to poison her using the modified baby bottle that would deliver cyanide through what would appear to be accidental exposure to childcare supplies. Maria's plan involved convincing Detective Rodriguez to examine specific childcare equipment while explaining safety procedures, then using the modified bottle to release cyanide gas in the enclosed space, causing fatal poisoning that would appear to be accidental exposure to cleaning chemicals rather than deliberate murder by a babysitter protecting her trafficking operations. But Maria's carefully planned murder of the detective was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of federal agents who had been investigating international child trafficking networks and had identified connections to her childcare services. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh of the FBI's Crimes Against Children Division had been conducting a comprehensive investigation into international child trafficking operations that exploited legitimate childcare services to identify, procure, and transport children for various criminal enterprises, including adoption fraud, forced labor, and sexual exploitation. Agent Walsh specialized in investigating child trafficking networks and had developed expertise in tracking criminal organizations that use childcare professionals to access vulnerable families. The federal investigation had been initiated by reports from multiple international law enforcement agencies and child protection organizations who had noticed patterns of missing children and suspicious childcare activities that suggested organized trafficking networks were exploiting babysitting services to identify targets while eliminating potential witnesses. Agent Walsh had been conducting surveillance of Maria's childcare activities and had documented evidence of systematic child procurement, family elimination, and coordination with international trafficking organizations that suggested her babysitting expertise was being used for organized criminal activity rather than legitimate childcare services. "Maria Santos, I'm Special Agent Walsh with the FBI," she announced as she entered the playroom where Maria was preparing to murder Detective Rodriguez. "I have federal warrants for your arrest on charges of international child trafficking, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your systematic exploitation of childcare services for criminal trafficking operations and elimination of potential witnesses." Maria's reaction to the federal agent's intervention was a combination of maternal deception and desperate attempts to maintain her childcare authority as she realized that law enforcement agencies at multiple levels had been investigating her trafficking activities and had connected them to systematic family murders and organized child exploitation. Her carefully maintained reputation as a loving babysitter had failed to protect her from comprehensive investigation by agencies with expertise in international child trafficking and organized exploitation crimes. Special Agent Walsh, there must be some serious misunderstanding about legitimate childcare services and the complex family dynamics involved in providing professional care for children whose parents face challenging work schedules and personal circumstances, Maria said frantically, while abandoning her plan to poison Detective Rodriguez and attempting to preserve some semblance of childcare credibility despite the overwhelming evidence against her criminal activities. I am a certified child care provider with 12 years of experience, providing loving care for Seattle's most precious children and supporting families during their most difficult times. All of my child care services comply with established safety standards and legal requirements designed to protect children while supporting family stability and parental peace of mind. Detective Rodriguez looked absolutely shocked as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the babysitter she had been investigating for child trafficking. Her child exploitation investigation had not only exposed Maria's systematic trafficking and murder operation, but had also prevented her own death at the hands of a killer who had been using child care services as cover for systematic elimination of parents and law enforcement threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed Maria's arrest revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise and the sophisticated methods she had developed to exploit child care expertise for systematic child trafficking and murder. Forensic analysis of Maria's child care operations revealed extensive evidence of her trafficking activities, including sophisticated communication equipment for coordinating with international criminal organizations, detailed records showing child procurement and transportation logistics, and comprehensive files containing family information on dozens of children who had been targeted for trafficking operations. Her apartment contained restraint devices disguised as child care equipment, drugging supplies, and detailed profiles of families who had been targeted for child procurement and parental elimination. The investigation also uncovered Maria's connections to international child trafficking networks that operated throughout the Pacific Northwest, using her child care services as a procurement and logistics hub for moving children to various criminal enterprises. Her network included corrupt adoption agencies, illegal labor operations, and international buyers who paid premium prices for children with specific characteristics and backgrounds. Most disturbing was the discovery of Maria's detailed knowledge of child psychology and family dynamics, which she had used to identify vulnerable children and manipulate family situations to facilitate trafficking operations while eliminating parents who posed threats to her criminal activities. Maria Santos was ultimately convicted of 10 counts of first-degree murder, international child trafficking, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, conspiracy to commit organized criminal enterprise activities, and numerous other charges related to her exploitation of child care services for criminal trafficking operations and elimination of potential witnesses. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout Seattle's child care community, prompting immediate reforms in babysitter licensing, family protection protocols, and child trafficking prevention measures designed to protect children and families from exploitation by trusted child care professionals involved in criminal activities. Several other babysitters and child care providers were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of child care operations and new requirements for background screening, ongoing monitoring, and family protection measures that made it more difficult for criminals to exploit child care services for systematic trafficking and murder. Detective Rodriguez and Special Agent Walsh received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in child care industry crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying trafficking operations and protecting children from exploitation by criminal child care professionals. Jennifer Harrison and other surviving families required extensive security consultations and psychological counseling to overcome the trauma of learning that their trusted babysitter had been systematically targeting their children for trafficking while murdering parents who discovered her criminal activities. The child care industry implemented comprehensive new safety protocols designed to protect children and families from exploitation by unethical child care providers. The case prompted comprehensive changes in child care regulation, including mandatory federal background checks for all child care providers, enhanced oversight of babysitting operations, real-time monitoring of child care communications, and new reporting procedures for suspicious child care behavior involving child safety or potential trafficking indicators. Maria's conviction also led to increased cooperation between childcare industry organizations and law enforcement agencies, investigating child trafficking with new protocols designed to identify childcare services that might be exploiting their family access for systematic criminal activities while eliminating potential witnesses. The childcare and broader family services industries implemented revolutionary new safety measures, including enhanced screening procedures for childcare professionals, comprehensive family protection programs, mandatory reporting of suspicious childcare activities, and improved training for recognizing signs of child trafficking and family endangerment in childcare settings. 5 years after Maria's conviction and life imprisonment, Seattle's childcare community continued to implement safeguards designed to protect children and families from childcare providers who might abuse their positions of trust and family access for criminal purposes. The babysitter, who had promised to love and protect children while supporting families during their most vulnerable moments, had instead used her childcare expertise and family access to commit systematic child trafficking and murder while exploiting the sacred trust between caregivers and the children they promised to nurture. However, her crimes had been thoroughly exposed and her victims had found justice through the dedication of investigators who refused to accept child-related deaths as mere tragic accidents. Maria Santos's final night of babysitting had ended in permanent federal imprisonment, where she would serve multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, proving that even childcare professionals who attempted to exploit their caregiving expertise for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated law enforcement agencies worked together to protect innocent children and families from predatory childcare providers. The babysitter's final night had concluded with her permanent removal from any possibility of harming children, serving as a lasting reminder that those entrusted with our most precious responsibilities must never abuse that sacred trust, and the childcare professionals who would exploit family vulnerability for criminal gain will ultimately face the full consequences of their betrayal of caregiving ethics and child protection. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.